Thanks, James. Thanks, Andy. It's been a good start already. In 1464, a statue was commissioned, and workers were sent to a quarry to cut a block of marble. If the slide comes up, there's a picture of a quarry, so you know what it looks like. One sculptor began the project in about 1465, but then he abandoned it about a year later. And 10 years went by, another sculptor came, took over the project, he quit as well. Specifically, he was complaining about the poor quality of the marble. And so there was just this slab, kind of roughly blocked out at the bottom, laying in the cathedral workshop yard somewhere, just kind of disused. The next slide, I think, is a block of marble. Yeah, there we go. So something like that from probably that quarry. And it just was left there, seemingly uncarvable, for about 25 years. And then in 1501, a young man came, was commissioned again for this project. And he was told, you have 2 years. He took 3. And in 1504, he finished it. And it stands in the Galleria dell'Accademia, sorry, Italians, in Florence, Italy. That man was Michelangelo. And the statue is one of the most famous in the world, David. Gosh, it's just incredible to think about. And I picked this story on purpose because of this passage, so let's go through it. Really quickly, though, Michelangelo, I love what he wrote about his sculpting process. He said this: the sculpture is already complete within the marble block before I start my work. It's already there. I just have to chisel away the superfluous material. I saw the angel in the marble and carved until I set him free, and every block of stone has a statue inside it. It is the task of the sculptor to discover it. So I think it's really helpful then for us as we look at this passage to consider the task of the sculptor in drawing out the beauty from a block of stone. But I also can't help but wonder, how does the stone feel about all that chiseling? Were we able to ask it? Would it be in pain, chipping and chiseling and sanding away? Would it be doubtful the work would ever finish? Would it be wondering why all this suffering? And maybe it's a silly example to anthropomorphize, to give human characteristics a slab of marble, but I want us to be honest as we consider even just this week. We have felt, or we will feel, great disappointment. We've observed or experienced despair. We've felt or witnessed the sting of discipline in our lives or in the lives of people around us. And so, just like we might imagine the stone feeling this great sense of pain, it can be easy for us amidst difficulty, amidst discipline, amidst disappointment, to wonder, where is God? Why this struggle? Is this pain worth it? And I think that's why we need this passage today. We need the perspective of the sculptor. We need to know amidst both difficulty and discipline that God is near, that He is with us in our sorrow, that He has bigger purposes in mind than we can fathom, that He is freeing the angel from within, so to speak, and that no sin or scheme of man can thwart His purposes, that no matter what we walk through, we have a hope that truly does not disappoint. And so, as we look at this passage tonight, I do want to show you how Isaiah talked with the people of Israel, how he shows them 2 ways that God offers comfort to them. And so, if I could summarize the passage and summarize this talk even, I would say something like this: take heart. God's purposes are good, and His redemption is coming. Take heart. His purposes are good, and his redemption is coming. And just to give you a little bit of direction so you know where we're headed, we'll look at the first 11 verses, and we'll consider some of those reminders about who God is and what he's doing, and then discuss around our tables. And then we'll come back and we'll look at the last half from 12 to 23, and we'll consider that redemption piece, whose we are, and we'll discuss that as well. So let's look at verses 1 through 11. And the first thing I want you to see in this chapter is just a simple statement. Hear God's reminders. Hear God's reminders. By way of reminder, we've talked a little bit about this in terms of context, but remember that up till chapter 39, the people were under invasion from Assyria, and then from 36 to 39, this is miraculous rescue, right? We've talked about it kind of a lot, but just to remember, because it's hard to remember some of this history. But specifically, you see the narrative about how 185,000 soldiers are struck down overnight, and then Hezekiah is sick, and he prays to the Lord, and God miraculously heals him and says, you can have 15 more years of your life, right? So there's this shift at chapter 40, which we talked about last week, where God had been talking about this Assyrian invasion, and now he's shifting to talk about some new threat, Babylon. And so as they hear this kind of shift in Isaiah's language, I get the sense that they're kind of in this waiting, this liminal space, you might say, this waiting time, this place where they're feeling relief on the one hand, Assyrian invasion is over, but also dread on the other, because Babylon is coming. And I imagine in my head this kind of image of climbing to the top of a mountain. You worked really, really hard to get up there. You finally made it. You're out of breath. You're looking back over this deep, deep, deep valley and this steep, steep cliff that you just climbed up. And you just want to sit down and rest. And then someone says, you got to do it all over again. So you can imagine then the temptation to despair of any sense of real rescue. And it's that context that Isaiah brings his prophecy. So as he speaks, God, through Isaiah, anticipates the fears, the despair, the dread that these people are facing. So look at verses 1 through 3. Listen to me, you who pursue righteousness and who seek the Lord. Look to the rock from which you were cut, to the quarry from which you were hewn. Look to Abraham, your father, and Sarah, who gave you birth. And he continues, but it's a reminder that he is the one who made them as people. They are a people because of God. They have their identity as the people of Israel because God made them as people. He took this random nomad and his wife, promised them kids, and fulfilled it. So I always have to ask myself, like, why would God say that here? Why now? Why in this point of this book? Why would God say these things? And I think that if we put ourselves in their shoes, if we think about it just a little bit, we can feel that fear. We can feel them wondering, first Assyria, now Babylon, are we no longer going to be a people? Are we no longer going to be God's people? Are we going to be utterly destroyed? And then look at verses 4 and 6. 4 through 6. Listen to me, my people. Hear me, my nation. Instruction will go out from me. My justice will become like a light to the nations. And then look further down at verse 6. Lift up your eyes to the heavens. Look to the earth beneath. The heavens will vanish like smoke. The earth will wear out like a garment. Its inhabitants die like flies. There's this world that God has made, and it feels like it's coming undone. He's conquered so many nations to bring them into this land, and now it seems like it's disappearing out from their grasp. And again, I think if we ask, why would God put this here and now, we might feel this sense of concern, at least, from the people. Are we going to be nomads again? Are we going to have no land? Are we going to have no place to be, to exist, to thrive? Will it all vanish like smoke and disappear? And then look at 7 and 8. Don't fear the reproach of mere mortals or be terrified by their insults. Well, if you're saying don't be afraid or be terrified, that must mean they feel afraid or terrified. He's anticipating that fear, and he's saying, look, I sent those Assyrians. They were my discipline for your idolatry and rebellion. I sent them. And at the same time, the people, I can imagine them feeling, well, Assyria is now and has come, and they've gone, and now Babylon's breathing down our necks. We can almost understand that fear. We can almost understand that dismay. I can hear them asking, are we just going to be a conquered people for the rest of our lives? Is this punishment ever going to end? And I think that Israel can be tempted here, and so can we. We can identify ourselves in these pages. Because we're tempted in the midst of that kind of suffering. We're tempted to lose sight of God in the midst of it all. We're tempted to believe that it's going to last forever. That God is spiteful or evil for sending it, for allowing it to happen. I think we can be tempted, they can be tempted to be more fearful of man or fearful of our circumstances than we are of the God who reigns supreme over all of it. It's a very real temptation. And so I would say, yes, they're fearful. The reason I say hear God's reminders is because God is speaking back to them in their fear. Because God is saying, okay, I hear you, you're afraid that you won't be a people anymore, that you won't have a place to live, or that my presence will be gone from you for the rest of your lives. But that's not true. They're fearful of their situation. They're forgetful about who God is and whose they are. And I just want us to notice also, in the midst of this, there's a repeated almost refrain. It feels like this comfort song that has this chorus over and over again. Verse 3, the Lord comforts Zion. Again, verse 3, joy and gladness will be found in her. Verse 5, my righteousness draws near, my salvation has gone out. Verse 6, my salvation will last forever, my righteousness will never fail. Verse 7, my righteousness will be forever, my salvation to all generations. God's responding to their fear with reminders about who he is and what he has done. And the beautiful thing as we close this first section and go to discussion is verses 9 and 10 and 11. Israel hears these things and they respond. They respond to those reminders that the Lord has given them with a plea of agreement with him. Look here. Awake, awake, arm of the Lord, clothe yourself with strength. Awake as in days gone by, as in generations of old. Was it not you who cut Rahab to pieces? Not us. Was it not you who pierced the monster through? Was it not you who dried up the sea, the waters of the great deep, and rode in the depths of the sea so that the redeemed might cross over? What a beautiful picture to see Israel not only reminded, but then responding back to God and saying, yes, God, you wake up and you do this thing because you're the only one who can. There's no thing, no created thing that you don't control. There's no enemy that you can't defeat. God, save us. So I think that just like that statue of David, the sculptor has a purpose in our lives. And it's for good. It's for his glory. And even when we face difficulty or when we face discipline like Israel did here, in the process we can trust that it is for good and for glory. So let's discuss around our tables this question: difficulty or discipline? In what ways do you hear God's voice reminding you who he is and what he's doing? I love hearing the conversation. That means that the question was either so good that you couldn't help but talk about it, or so bad that all you're talking about is how bad the question is. That's good either way. I like talking. Continuing. Remember, we saw in the first half that need to hear God's reminders to us, and even to respond back to Him in prayer. But in the second half, I want us to see the hope in God's redemption. Hope in God's redemption. In the first bit, putting ourselves in Israel's shoes, we can feel with them that temptation to be fearful in our own hard situations. I think whether it is that we're facing discipline like Israel did in this time, or just a difficult situation that happens because of the effects of sin in the world, that we don't really have control over, that just happen. No matter what it is, I think we can all recognize that tendency, just like Israel, to be fearful and to forget who God is and what He's up to. And the reason I say they're fearful and forgetful is because verse 12, God responds back to their response. He responds to their fears again. He responds to their praise again. And He says, even I, am He who comforts you. Who are you that you fear mere mortals, human beings who are but grass? Who are you that you forget the Lord your Maker, who stretches out the heavens and lays the foundations of the earth? Who are you that you live in constant terror every day because of the wrath of the oppressor who is bent on destruction? Where's the wrath of the oppressor? He tells us that He is the one who comforts. He is the one who contends for us. He's the one who even corrects us when we need it. And I love how He does it with questions. All through the Bible, you see God asking people questions. I promise you this, it's not because He doesn't know the answer. He's asking them questions because He wants them to think about it, to reflect, to wonder, oh wait, what was that thing I forgot? What was that thing I was afraid of? Look at verse 12. Who are you that you're afraid of man? We'll come back to that. Verse 13. Who are you that you've forgotten the Lord, your Maker, who stretched out the heavens and laid the foundation? We'll come back to that as well. Who are you that you fear the wrath of the oppressor? So God's responding to them with this assurance, with comfort, that their fears, real fears, are things that are under His control. So they're no real thing at all. Their forgetfulness, understandable. We forget. We're human. But it's of the one who will never forget them. So I want to look at some parallels. I loved, as I studied this chapter, kind of seeing some parallels back and forth. It's like Isaiah repeats it in different words. It kind of draws them back. So looking at verses 1 and 3, remember we talked about how God made them a people. He drew them out of the quarry, so to speak, and made them into a people from nothing. And then in verse 13, He says, I'm the one who made you, and I'm the one who will keep you, and I can even make you a people all over again if that's what it takes. Verses 4 through 6, we talked about how there was this place, this earth, generally speaking, in Israel, a country, area, land that He gave to them, that He conquered nations to give them a place. And in verse 13, we're reminded again that He is the one who lays the foundations of the earth. So since they have it from Him, they can have it back from Him if they lose it. And then in verses 7 and 8, we looked at how, yes, there's reproach, yes, there's rebuke, yes, there's discipline in life for the Israelites in this scenario, and we could think about discipline in our own lives as well, right? Yes, there's discipline in their lives, but verse 12 reminds us, who are you that you fear mere mortals, human beings who are but grass? I think I would say it this way, God will redeem them. And not even those who are tools of His rebuke can delay that redemption. They're like grass. I would say looking at 14, 15, and 16, continuing down in the chapter, I think it's so beautiful here. think it is so gracious of God to give these next couple of verses, because what he does here is he tells them the conclusion. He tells them what everything's going to lead to. He gives them a glimpse of that redemption that they have to look forward to, that we have to look forward to and hope. He says, the cowering prisoners will soon be set free. You won't die in your dungeon. You won't lack any bread. I, the Lord your God, who stirs up the sea so that its waves roar, the Lord Almighty is his name. I have put my words in your mouth. I have covered you with the shadow of my hand. I, who set the heavens in place and laid the foundations of the earth, and who say to Zion, you are my people. God is saying to them, I will redeem you. I will give you back a land, and you will never not be my people. And then he has a task for them. Not only does God respond to them just by that reminder of whose they are as redeemed, as his people who will be redeemed, he also responds to them, putting their fears in perspective, and as he reminds them of who he is, calling them to respond. Look at verse 17. He changes the language again. Awake, awake, rise up, Jerusalem. Rise up, Jerusalem. You who have drunk from the hand of the Lord the cup of his wrath, you who have drained to its dregs the goblet that makes people stagger. He knows that they are going through a rough spot. He knows that they are afraid and that they have forgotten him maybe. He knows that there is need for comfort and consolation. And look at verse 19. These double calamities have come upon you. Who can comfort you? Ruin and destruction, famine and sword. Who can console you? Again, remember, God doesn't ask questions he doesn't already know the answer to. So that begs a question for us. What's the answer here? Who can comfort and console you? The implied answer to that question is nothing. The implication is that things of this world can't do that. So I feel this in my bones. It is tempting to go and find all kinds of different comforts and consolations in this world. It's tempting when life is hard to find those solutions in people or possessions, in powers and places. All around us, we go to the God of comfort to try to eat or drink our way to feeling better. We go to the God of control. And we think that getting the right party and power or policies and position will solve it for us. We convince ourselves that the God of consumerism will be sufficient. We can just have the right house, the right car, the right games, the right toys, the right whatever. Fill in the blank. We might even get convinced that our oppressor is the one who will save us. Well, I'll just bow to Babylon's gods. They've taken care of me so far. But all of that disappoints, all of that fails. None of that truly comforts and consoles us. So I think instead of wondering why God's asking that question, I think it's pretty obvious. I think he's asking this question because he wants us to see that none of those things we turn to, aside from him, can comfort or console us. That maybe if we put it another way, God would say, don't turn to idols. That he would even say, those good things I gave you can be idols too. the people, the identity that I made you into, that could be an idol. Don't worship it. That place that I gave you, that land, that could be an idol. Don't worship it. And again, I'll read verse 12. Even I, am he who comforts you. And I don't want this to sound like a telling off. I don't want it to sound like I'm just lecturing everyone. This sermon hits me so hard because these are temptations in my heart. I cannot tell you the sadness I felt this week. So I need this passage. But I cannot leave us there. Look at verse 22. It is incredible. God is telling his people, don't fear your circumstances, don't forget your God. Don't despair, don't be dismayed in the face of whatever hard thing you're walking through, not even if that hard thing is sent by me as a corrective. And my question for you all is this: why do we know that? Why can we trust God's word at that? We have the advantage of perspective. The lens of history don't just tell us that Israel went into Babylon and came out of it. The lenses of history also help us to have clarity when we read verse 22. And he says, this is what your sovereign Lord says, your God who defends his people. See, I have taken out of your hand the cup that made you stagger. From that cup, the goblet of my wrath, you will never drink again. You will never drink again. Do you hear it? Why will they never drink it again? Why will we never drink it again? Because it's empty. Because Jesus drank it for us. What? We don't have to despair of destruction. We hope. We hope in a God who gave us all that we have, yes, even the difficulties, even the discipline. And we know that our hope in that God never disappoints. So I hope that you have been reminded today of who God is, that he comforts, that he consoles, that he contends for us, that he even corrects us. And I hope that you've been reminded of whose you are in Christ. That he gave himself, the ultimate comforter, the ultimate advocate, the ultimate redeemer of all things in our lives. As we close, let's discuss one more question. How does your hope in future redemption change the way that you live your life today?